things work is that testimony is introduced by the appellant, and then there's a question and answer period. Only following all of the presentation by the appellant and questions in that regard will testimony be received from members of the floor, but I'll try and navigate you through that each step of the way. We ask that members of the audience avoid asking repetitive questions or testimony. And I would advise anyone who's aggrieved by the decision of the board tonight may appeal to either Lehigh or Northampton County Court within 30 days following the issuance of the written decision of the zoning hearing board. Do we have any administrative matters that we have to deal with, Attorney Schock?
Yeah, I believe we are going to go out of order from the agenda because there is a continuance request. Okay. You can stay there.
Why don't you?
Yeah, that's fine. They can go to the podium. So the first case is, for the purpose of this request, is 251 East Church Street, which is the remand.
Right. Attorney Preston.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, good evening, Jim Preston, and I represent the owners of the property that are the subject of the remand hearing. I was contacted yesterday by Mr. Alt. He can testify if he needs to. He apparently learned of this hearing just, I believe, last week. Sure. And Ian tried to get legal counsel in the interim. He did call me earlier this week. I wasn't able to get back to him. I did talk to him yesterday. I think he probably should have representation at the hearing. I'm here tonight to request a continuance. I'm not here to prosecute the case. I'm not in a position to do that. I've just today received the court decision that remanded the matter back. I haven't seen any transcripts. I'm not that familiar with it. I'd like to help them and represent them in this matter, but I'm here tonight solely for the reason to request a continuance to allow Mr. Alt to have legal representation. I have talked to Mr. Stevens. I called him earlier today. He got back to me later today. I don't believe they oppose the continuance, but he does have some concerns, so I'll let him address the board.
Yep, Mr. Stevens.
Yes, respectfully, I'm representing the appellants in this matter and have done so through the remand with Judge Daly. We're prepared to go forward with today's hearing. When I had the conversation with Attorney Preston, my concern was the prejudice that would be incurred by the appellants if we don't go forward today, particularly in losing witnesses. I have 3 witnesses on deck today to give testimony. With respect to dates, we do have availability March 5th, 9th, 10th, May 4th, 5th, and 6th. March 5th and 10th, I'm sorry. May 4th, 5th, and 6th. The May 13th date is difficult.
Okay. Let me just talk to the zoning officer. That's our scheduled date, but I don't want to speak for the board, but I'm okay changing the May backup date because it's so far. We're so far in advance.
But let's change it to the backup date then, please.
So May 13th?
Well, no,
Let's canvass these dates that Attorney Stevens.
I think he can't do May 13th. So I guess my question is,
Change that to another
can
May
we
date.
change that to a different day in May as our May backup and use it
And
for that
eliminate the
purpose?
13th.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I just can't guarantee yet if we will have council chambers or we'll have to go elsewhere.
Can we resolve that exact date in May then?
The question is there any possibility at March 5th or 10th?
No. The dates are fixed for March,
Okay. So then we're looking at the May dates and
unless either the April dates work for you.
the April's not working, May 4th,
Okay.
5th, or 6th.
So-
Or if any of those dates would work.
Gene, just can you just go off the record? Okay. So is there any May 4, 5, 6, or 10 where you're not available?
Okay.
I'm okay, but the
Okay.
5th is probably city council.
Okay.
The first Tuesday in May is probably city council, so that would have to be the
Or we
6th.
just go to Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just move it up one Wednesday. Work
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah, Craig, if we can, we'd like to
Is that okay?
use town hall if we can.
All right.
So that date would be what again?
There is a architectural review board meeting that evening, but they don't necessarily always go for multiple hours. So
Okay.
let me work with you and I'll
But
let you know.
we can always announce. We have enough time to announce the
Absolutely.
place anyway. Okay. We can go back on the record. So that's May
Okay.
6th, right?
It's May 6th, correct.
Okay. So the hearing will be continued to to Wednesday, May 6th, which is the first Wednesday in the month of May. The place will be announced.
Okay,
Okay?
that's fine.
Thanks. Thanks for everybody's cooperation.
Thank you for your cooperation, Judge.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, and it'll be 6 p.m., I presume?
It could potentially be 6 or 6:30.
Yeah, we'll have to advertise the time. We're presuming it'll be 6, but again, there may be a conflict in scheduling and we'll advise you. All right, having dispensed with that, our first hearing will be that of 250 Wyandotte Street. And at this time, I'd like everybody who's either going to testify or is expecting or thinking of questioning to please stand and be sworn in. If you're even thinking of speaking, please.
Raise your right hands, please. Swear by mighty God, the searcher of all hearts, that the testimony that you shall give in this proceeding should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And as you shall answer to God at the last great day. Do you so swear?
I do.
You may be seated.
Yeah, so just use that for anything.
Thank you. And this may be a moot point since we've been talking about this for a number of months, but when was the property posted, please?
Grant Genslinger, Sarah Mansion RE LLC.
Excuse me, you're going to have to speak into the microphone.
Sorry,
Yeah.
property.
We just need to know when the placard was put up. When was it posted?
The placard was put up, thinking of the date, was the day after the hearing last 2 weeks ago, the next morning.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we're fine to proceed then. Anything from you, Eric?
Now, do we know what date that was? So the record accurately reflects it.
26, wasn't it?
2 weeks ago?
I think it was 3 members.
I thought our meeting.
Yeah, the hearing was the 22nd.
23rd.
So was it the day after? So it was posted on January 23rd.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Okay. Right, Attorney Roberts, we can proceed.
Good evening, members of the board. Before I get started with my presentation, I have a packet for each of you, which will have all the exhibits I intend to
Yeah.
introduce.
Just
I'm going to hand them out.
please. Will this be the packet from which we're working on everything tonight then?
Yes.
Thank you. That's a big help.
Thank you.
His appearance in this case, too.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask him.
Go ahead.
He
Now-
hasn't yet, has he?
He hasn't, no. He only dealt with the continuum.
Mr. Stevens, can I ask you? I don't think you have appeared when this was continued before. Are you participating in this one?
I am on behalf of
I can't
Okay.
hear you. On
All
here.
right.
I am on behalf of the Hoods of Bethlehem.
Okay.
I don't know if this is appropriate now, but I would like an opportunity to hire the Hotel Bethlehem as to your agreed status in this particular. As an objector.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine now. So he's contesting standing. We can rule on it after he has an opportunity to question the property owner with respect to what he believes would be the elements of standing. We might as well just get it out of the way, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Yeah. sure.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
Okay.
You want to do it now?
Yeah.
So I want to call Mr. Ames then.
Yep.
Yeah, why don't you come over here so we have a microphone for you to use?
And I think at this point, Mr. Stevens, it would be it would be name, address, and the interest in the matter. And then he can question on that, and then we'll decide whether they're standing.
Fair enough.
Okay.
May it please the zoning hearing board, as I mentioned before, I represent the Hotel Bethlehem. Please state your full name for the zoning hearing board.
Bruce Haynes, Haines.
What is your personal address?
My personal address is 63 West Church Street, Bethlehem.
What is your business address?
437 Main Street, Bethlehem.
And what is your current position at the Hotel Bethlehem?
I am the managing partner for the investor group that owns the hotel.
And can you explain to the zoning hearing board how you believe the hotel and yourself would be aggrieved by virtue?
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
How you would be aggrieved with respect to this particular request for a zoning variance?
We own a business in the commercial business district of the city of Bethlehem. We have a banquet facilities as part of our hotel. We have a 3,100 square foot ballroom banquet facility and a 2,600 square foot mural ballroom banquet facility. We count on banquet business as a key part of our business, and we comply with essentially the laws of the city of Bethlehem in terms of zoning. And the particular property that's before you tonight is talking about taking residential, is putting a new facility that competes directly with existing facilities, not only at the Hotel Bethlehem, but other businesses who are located in the business district of the city. And the permitting this facility to operate in a residential district of which it's in is outside the purveyance of the city zoning map, and conversions of residential neighborhoods and residential districts to commercial business districts creates significant anxiety.
Yeah,
Hold
yeah,
on, Mr. Haynes.
yeah, that part you will get to, Mr. Haynes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think right now we're just trying to establish whether you
Oh, I
have
see.
interest, what you think your impact was if
Okay.
this were granted, and then
Okay.
the attorney for the applicant has the right to cross-examine you on that, and
Okay.
then he can make an objection after that cross-examination to standing, and we'd have to rule on it.
Okay.
Well, not me. The board.
So I was asked with the impact, and I
Yep.
just said any expansion of the commercial business district creates anxiety for any business doing business in the commercial business districts. That in terms of thinking about ever moving forward to make additional investments when you permit, if they were to be permitted to operate in a residential district.
What are your concerns, if any, as far as the reliability or the integrity of the zoning code with respect to?
That's not relevant. It's
We're not going
the
there right
impact on him at this point.
I'm
okay.
getting to that, as far as your future plans for development for the hotel.
Just a moment. Is that even relevant?
Well, the first part of the question is not relevant. It's the impact on his property is what we need to know.
And I'm asking the question, future plans for development, how does this project and this variance impact those future plans?
Hold on a second. I don't agree. I don't agree.
Let's ask him one question and we'll go from there, because I'm not sure it's relevant, but let me just hear where you're going.
Well, I think I mentioned that it would impact the decision about us expanding our business and open the door for any other business that's operating in the commercial business district who believe the city has a commercial business district that now has unlimited area beyond what the commercial business zoning district of the city is. So we have no problem competing against businesses in commercial business district, but what this does is open the floodgates to additional businesses across the residential districts of the city. It certainly impacts every business that's operating in the central business district, including ours, which has a facility that will directly compete. This business will directly impact our business in our banquet facilities.
As I understand, is one of your concerns the fact if this particular variance would be granted and it's not in accordance with the law for a variance, would that subject you to any form of unfair competition in the residential district?
That's not relevant. Competition is not regulated by zoning. There has to be an impact if this were granted. And to presuppose that if the board granted a variance, that it was improperly granted, that's not a good question. So we're not here about competition. How is his property impacted if they get the relief they asked for? That's what we need to know.
I think I stated what the impact is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think we were done as to what you thought your impact was.
Yes, Attorney Roberts.
Do you have any questions?
If I could have a couple.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate, can you see the Sayer Mansion from the Hotel Bethlehem?
Yes,
You expect any stormwater runoff from the Sayer Mansion to affect the Hotel Bethlehem?
no,
Do you expect any increased traffic congestion in front of the Hotel Bethlehem if the variance was granted?
no,
So I believe you're concerned about the impact on your business if this variance is granted. I understand.
my business plans going forward. Yes.
I have no more questions.
Okay.
My objection would be that his interest in competition, while reasonable, is not making him an aggrieved party in terms of a zoning hearing board. There is no direct impact. There's no impact on increased traffic, stormwater runoff. There's no indication that there's a light that's going to be shining from the Sayer Mansion into the Hotel Bethlehem. And when it comes to zoning, I would object to his standing as an aggrieved party in this hearing because shows no relevant impacts. Competition, while it may be a concern, does not give him standing to be an aggrieved party in this hearing.
So we have it on the record, Mr. Haynes. A couple of questions. Can you tell me how far is the Hotel Bethlehem from here and how do you get from the Sayer Mansion to the Hotel Bethlehem on the most direct path? Just want to get on the record, at least the proximity. So we've at least got all the facts that we need to know.
Well, the proximity from the Sayer Mansion would be come across the bridge, and turn onto Main Street, and we're right there. So it's probably a John Daly driver plus pitching wedge from the hotel.
So that would be about 420 yards.
Something.
That's just a pitching wedge, yeah.
That's just the crow flies. That doesn't
Yeah.
take into account.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah, why don't we go
Yeah.
outside?
let's go discuss the standard.
Jane, we're going to go off the record just briefly.
Do you want one too? He's the nice zoning officer. I like it.
Give me a second, I'll be right back.
It'd be nice to go have a drink. Water or other.
Where is everybody?
I think that I think they're just discussing the advice I gave them.
I figured out who was making the
Oh.
motion. All right, Gene, I'd like to go back on the record, please.
All right, so I think on this, we should make a motion and vote because it's a significant decision.
I agree. Maybe we have a motion.
Yep.
Wait a second, Craig's not here.
Okay.
Oh, sh-
Well, I mean,
Off the record, that's engineer's fault. He asked for a water.
Oh, okay. So, you
Oh, please don't hold that against us.
you know what? I'll do it.
What, for the roll call? Or
Yeah.
I can do it too.
I'll do it. So, all right. So, can somebody make a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the objection and say that Mr. Haynes does not have standing.
Is it Mr. Haynes or the Hotel Bethlehem? I think it's who he
Hotel
says
Bethlehem.
Okay.
And do we have a second to the motion?
I second.
It was Mary Frances Stone.
It was Peter and then Mary Frances. Got it. Okay. Want to take a roll call?
Mary Frances,
Yes.
Peter Schneck,
Yes.
Linda Gardner,
Yes.
Jim Shantz,
Yes.
Bill Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the motion. He still has standing as an objector and can create a record as far as any issues that he sees with the application. Correct?
No, we haven't. We're saying that he indicated that he was here on behalf of Hotel Bethlehem, right? We're saying they do not have standing to participate as a party in this matter.
Right. But then I want to put my objection clearly on the record that I think he still has an ability to serve as an objector and ask questions where he sees problems with the application. The fact that this zoning hearing board has made a ruling on his aggrieved status is only for appeal purposes if this gets appealed to a higher level.
Do
So-
you have any authority there? I mean, typically objectors need to have standing to participate in the matter. You have the right to appeal this. We'd be doing this all over again if you're right, is what would happen, I think. That's the risk the applicant takes in making that standing. Because my understanding of what would happen is if this is granted, you'd appeal, say it should not have been decided without my participation. And then it would get, I think what normally would happen is it would get remanded back here. Because if you don't have standing, you don't typically have a right to it. Now, albeit the board often will say, we'll let people ask questions or make a statement at the end, even if we don't feel they have standing, but we haven't gotten to that point.
Yeah, and I would respectfully submit that he has standing to participate as an objector and create a record to point out the deficiencies in this application for a variance. However, to the extent that this board has ruled that he's not an aggrieved party to have standing. for purposes of appeal.
Do you have authority to say that you still get to participate in the matter? That's what I'm saying. I've never heard that before, Mr. Stevens.
I believe such authority exists. Do I have a case that I could hand up to the zoning hearing board right now? I do not.
In absence of that, I would say he does not have
Okay,
standing.
no. Do you have a position on that?
I don't.
I mean, because you're the one most at risk.
Well,
'Cause
no,
we'll be
I-
back here doing it all over again.
No, I understand he has the ability to appeal his lack of standing.
Mhm.
And if a higher court would say, no, the zoning hearing board was wrong and he has standing, they can remand it for a hearing where he can participate.
Right.
We're not presuming that you grant our application and give us
Right.
the relief we requested, but I don't think he has a right to participate in the hearing. He can certainly go into public comment at that point and
Right.
make a position, but that doesn't.
Or you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, so you won't participate, but I think as has been the board's practice, You certainly, we do not let people not speak at the end.
That's fine.
That's what you've done in the past, correct? I mean, they could change their minds, but typically, right. Yeah, yeah, so.
All right.
So how about from a personal basis? He's a resident on Church Street in Bethlehem. I think he has the ability to ask questions as an objector to the extent that this impacts him.
That would be a different
100%.
question. For example, everyone has been here often enough to know that sometimes the board will still let some people ask questions or make a statement, even if they're not participating in the matter. But we do that on we're not there yet. It's an individual basis, so I don't know. I mean, there's oftentimes Mr. Haynes has participated when he's lived nowhere or been nowhere near the property, and the board has been lenient in that regard. If that's what he's asking, they'll decide that when it comes to it, right?
Right, and
And I think you're saying you're
Attorney Roberts
okay.
has the right to object.
If he wants to make his position known to help the board inform his decision based on his understanding of the law or the case that I present before the board, I'm not going to object to a citizen getting up in front of at a public meeting and making their voice heard. My issue was solely with his participation in the hearing as a formal objector, which is why I objected to the standing of the Hotel Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And if he wanted to participate as a resident of the city of Bethlehem, I'd have the same objection to him as a resident. Is he an aggrieved party as a resident living on, I think it's Church Street. I don't have the exact.
Yeah.
63.
It's 60, so it's just so it's on the record, his address is 63. Church
63
Street,
West Church,
West
right?
Church.
Yep.
Which is in relatively
And we
close
have that, but-
proximity to the
Just
subject
the third
property.
bite at the apple, I mean.
Yeah. I think the ruling's been clear, Attorney Stevens.
Are you now saying you want to have standing because you live at 63 West Church Street? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Do you object to
I
that?
would object to that as well.
You guys know better. More 63 West Church is
Oh, it's still on this side.
still on the
of
side
town.
of the town, right?
Yeah, it's just down the street from here.
Further away.
Actually further away than the hotel.
Right. I guess
So
you
you on or off now?
we're on the record.
We're on the record.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Okay, so. Okay.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
Well, I might encourage you then to ask the same
Sure.
questions
So-
based
Yeah.
on a resident of 63
Let's-
Church Street.
Do you know how far you are away from the Sayer Mansion from your home at 63 West Church Street?
About 450 yards of pitching driver and a pitching wedge by John Daly.
If you,
That as the crow flies again.
as the crow flies.
Okay.
I'd add a putt.
As the
Okay.
crow flies.
At your personal residence, do you anticipate any increase, for example, stormwater runoff based if the zoning variance relief was granted?
No.
Do you expect any increase in traffic if the relief asked for by Sayer Mansion was granted?
I don't know.
Can you see the Sayer Mansion from your residence?
Yes.
Okay. I have no more questions.
Right. And then if you would, Mr. Haynes, can you tell us how you would be personally aggrieved?
Well, as a resident of the city of Bethlehem, as most of you know, I believe in the integrity of our zoning ordinance and the proper execution of our zoning ordinance, and to ensure the viability of our city, the area where I live, where we conduct the business, and for anybody that lives here, to know what the zoning map is and be sure that the integrity of our zoning is maintained. And I feel that that's a very serious issue, and it's something that clearly, I have personally been involved with in the past in another property about the same distance from my property. And I think we've been aggrieved by that. And I believe that the city, all residents of the city are aggrieved when residential commercial ventures intrude into residential neighborhoods.
Anyone else on the board with a question for Mr. Haynes?
Not for Mr. Haynes, but for Mr. Pfeiffer then.
Go ahead, Mr. Shantz.
Mr. Pfeiffer, do you know offhand if the zoning map was redrawn to put 250 Wyandotte Street in a medium density residential district when the map was redrawn in 2012?
I do not know the answer to that.
Do you know if it had been in a business district prior to the redrawing in 2012?
I do not know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No. Okay. So what is the?
All right, Gene, we're off the record now, just briefly.
I mean,
Come down.
yeah.
Same decision.
Yeah. Not a part of the case.
I mean, I agree with their attitude and letting people speak and letting. I don't know. How do you feel?
Decision's the same. Stand.
For questions. Questions.
They're not part, they don't have party status. We're not granting. You can stand up in the audience.
But he's not represented.
No, because he's not a party to the case.
Right, so
Decide to permit, it's still in our discretion.
Yeah.
But
So-
at this point, it doesn't
You
stand.
can ask the question to the attorney. Back to the question. I hear no questions. The attorney can object to those questions.
At the end.
But the questions would have.
During the course of the hearing.
Mr. Stevens is asking to say one more thing.
Yeah, when we're finished.
Okay,
Hang on.
I think we should go outside.
okay.
All right, let's.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Going outside, we are breaking. Stevens isn't sharing this meeting.
Can you read that?
Yeah, this is what I would prefer. Anyone can participate.
I'm happy to hear what your work for. Yes. They would love to give us.
Sorry, I said that.
If you were consistent, every other attorney, last quarter left, every other attorney.
Gene, I'd like to go back on the record, please.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the objection and deny Mr. Haynes's standing.
May I have a second to the motion?
Second the motion.
Ms. Stone,
Yes.
Mr. Schneck,
Yes.
Ms. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Shantz,
Yes.
and Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Yes. Now, to clarify, Mr. Haynes, even though we have not granted you standing, it's been our tradition to allow residents to ask questions or make statements in the due course of the proceeding. You will not, however, have standing as a party to this case.
Okay, if anybody else is in the room who does have standing, do they have to go through the same inquisition?
Theoretically, if they want to be a party to the case.
A party to the case?
Right, to have standing to
Doesn't
be a party to
preclude
the
that,
case.
it doesn't preclude me or that party from filing an appeal based on a ruling.
Anybody can file, and if someone who's not here theoretically could, that has no bearing on whether that appeal is properly filed or whether they are a party aggrieved and can file appeal. I mean, if you've got $172.50 or whatever it costs, you can file an appeal.
Okay, so I can question witnesses as a private citizen, a resident of the city of Bethlehem.
That's correct.
Okay.
Consistent with prior practice.
Consistent with every other meeting I've ever been
Been
to.
to,
This is
exactly.
the first meeting I've ever been to where anybody was ever disqualified, so thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Attorney Roberts, I think we can now proceed with your appeal.
You should speak into the microphone.
And if you have to walk around, just take the one from there that has a long enough cord.
I don't know. So-
Okay.
I will use that later. I have some witnesses who will get up and look into the exhibits we presented. So thank you, board, for this evening. Just to give a little preface here before we get started. I'm Richard Roberts. I'm from Zader Law in Allentown, and I'm here representing Sayer Mansion. Currently, Sayer Mansion is looking to build an addition onto the current historic mansion that shall function as basically an event space. Currently, Sayer Mansion puts up a seasonal white tent that I'm sure anybody who comes across the Hill to Hill Bridge on 378 is familiar with during the summer months. They hold meetings, corporate events, weddings, and such in that space. What they're looking for tonight is to be able to build a permanent structure as an addition to the Sayer Mansion. I provided to Craig Pfeiffer this afternoon, and he said he did forward along to the solicitor a legal memorandum, which provides 3 avenues to get to the same place. We go through the first one. Under the zoning ordinance, any building that is built that is attached to the main building is not considered an accessory structure. It's considered an addition. And that the proposed use in this accessory structure will be an accessory use because it is customarily incidental to the Sayer Mansion itself. That's our first argument. Second argument is if you believe it's not an addition, it is permitted by right under the zoning ordinance as an accessory building with a permitted accessory use as the building and the use is customarily incidental as defined by the law to the Sayer Mansion. If, however, the board believes that the 1991 variance that granted the use that is currently in 1991, the zoning hearing board granted a use variance to operate this site as a hotel. It is our position that they put no restrictions on that other than they couldn't operate a kitchen in the building. That was amended in 2002 by Grant when he came before this board to amend that condition. If, however, this board believes that there is a condition in that variance grant that no accessory building could be built on this property, we're going to ask for a change of that condition. Under the law in variance, you can either ask for a brand new use variance, which we're not asking for here. We're asking for a change in that condition. What testimony will provide today is that the change in circumstances in the business, in the area, traffic patterns, noise patterns makes that condition that there can be no permanent accessory structure no longer appropriate for this particular site. So either one of those 3 avenues gets us to where we want to go. We believe any one of those 3 avenues is appropriate and gets us the relief that we're asking for. So at this time, the first person I would call is Grant Genslinger. He is the founder of the hospitality business and the current owners of the Sayer Mansion.
Yes, Grant Genslinger.
Okay. Now, how long have you been involved with Sayer Mansion?
Since we purchased the property in 2002.
Okay. Who owned the property prior to you?
A investment group headed by Mr. Capilano, and it was operated as a hotel with special events.
Okay. Now, when you bought the hotel in 2002, was it in a residential district?
It's a medium-density residential district that has several other businesses in that district.
Now, I'd like to ask you, you said you operate a hotel.
Yes.
And how are you allowed to operate that hotel?
The original variance was given to operate as a hotel /inn, and we have been operating as that. The main building is a 19-room. It was granted as a 20-room. And when we asked to be allowed to serve a full breakfast to guests, we forgave one of those rooms for a guest breakfast kitchen.
You said this was a variance that was granted in 1991.
No, and the kitchen, yeah, the original variance was 1991-92. Yes,
Now, were you given a copy of that decision when you purchased the property?
yes.
I'm handing you what's been marked as Exhibit A2.
Mhm.
Can you tell the board what that is?
It's the findings of the zoning hearing board for the approval for the Hotel Inn, 20 rooms, from 1991.
And is that a true and correct copy of the decision that you were given when you purchased the hotel?
Yes.
All right. Now, can you tell me a bit about the neighborhood that surrounds the mansion?
The neighborhood is in the Fountain Hill Historic District, and is on the corner, prominently on the corner of 378 and West 3rd Street. There is an adjoining mansion that is also part of the Fountain Hill Historic District, and several other buildings, one of which is another historic structure in that particular block.
Okay. Now, how would you describe your relationship with your neighbors?
Well, I think we try to be very good neighbors. I think the example of that is the neighboring property, the Wilbur Mansion, which is a very important historic structure, is also involved in historic preservation. And I think the Wilbur Mansion project, as an example of historic preservation, and the Sayre Mansion with 18 years of historic preservation, proves the adage that preservation is progress, and that progress is only possible through a diversity of income streams to preserve these properties.
So talk about diversity of income streams for these properties. Can you explain to the board what you mean by that?
Not only the hotel rooms, but we have a small conference facility in the historic mansion where we hold private events, as well as, since we purchased the property, we have been hosting seasonal events under tent since 2002, and have applied and received a tent permit for those seasonal events every year since then, for 18 years.
Let me focus on this. So you talk about preservation of the mansion is important.
Yes,
And in fact, in that 1991 decision, that was one of the reasons the board gave for granting the use variance,
yes, it was.
because the owners at that time, according to this decision, agreed that it would be best for preservation of the building.
Yes, and it was necessary for those diverse income streams to be considered as the only means to preserve that structure.
And is it fair to say preserving let me ask you this, when was Sayre Mansion built?
1858.
So would it be fair to say that it is expensive to preserve a historic building?
Yes, it is, of course.
Does it get more expensive as years go on?
Of course.
Is it more expensive now than it would have been in 1991?
Yes,
Is it more expensive than it would have been in 2002?
yes,
Does it get more expensive year over year?
yes.
And does that increase in expense, your job as the owner of the mansion is to preserve the historic mansion, correct?
Yes, it is. And I would like to comment that when we purchased in 2002, we immediately applied for and received membership in Historic Hotels of America, an honor we share with Mr. Haynes at Hotel Bethlehem. We also applied and were admitted into Select Registry, Distinguished Inns of North America, and have held that distinction for the last 18 years.
So the historic preservation hotel is important for you,
Yes,
and your group operates more than just the Sayre Mansion.
yes, we have additional hotels and restaurants in historic structures.
All right, so historic structures is important to the organization that you operate.
Yes, it's one of our mission focuses, yes.
And then I know I asked you this before, I'm asking again, it gets more expensive every year to preserve the structure.
Yes, it
Is
does.
it fair to say the older the building, the more expensive it is?
Yes, it's fair to say that.
And in order to preserve the historic structure, you need to find new sources of income.
That's true.
And you said when you initially bought the hotel, it would operate as a 20-room hotel with a conference center,
Yes.
and you didn't have the ability to have a kitchen in there. Is that fair to say?
No, originally there was a prohibition on having a kitchen. When we purchased the property, we appealed as it's inappropriate for a historic inn or hotel not to offer an appropriate breakfast. As a matter of fact, Select Registry requires an appropriate breakfast. We were granted that, and we received a building permit. And when the kitchen was finished, we received occupancy from the fire and mechanical inspector or whatever.
So when you applied for that variance, the prohibition on no kitchen was no longer appropriate.
Right. Now, of course, that was just for guests of the hotel. We're not open to the public.
Okay. All right. So at this point, you currently operate an event space?
Yes.
And how does that event space operate?
Our small conference room accommodates up to 40 people. And under tent, with the size tent that we have, our seasonal tent can accommodate up to 150 people.
And tell me a bit about that tent. What were the months of operation?
The summer season months, so May through September. And we put that tent up at that time and keep it up the whole season. And the tent permit reflects those time frames.
And the first time you put the tent up was when?
2002.
And do you know when the first time the tent was put up in that place?
The first record that we have was 1997. The previous owner got tent permits every year from 1997 that we have record of, and we have done it every year since then.
Now, I guess maybe this is kind of out of order, so I apologize to the board. Exhibit A6. And did you do a tent application last year?
Yes.
Okay. And that was in 2019?
Yes.
Now I'm handing you what's been previously marked as Exhibit A7. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do. It's a tent permit.
And did you submit that tent permit to the city of Bethlehem?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if that permit was granted?
Yes, it was. And the tent was inspected as it is every year after we put the skin on it. Yes.
Who inspects the tent?
The city of Bethlehem.
You know, can we interrupt for 1 second? Are there exhibits out on the table so that anyone in the audience could see that?
Sure. I
Any
can
members
do
of the
that.
public
Throw
can
them out.
have access to your. Just
Just throw them on the table.
Yeah.
There, and anyone.
where they sign in, please. Yeah, there you go.
Do you know who does an inspection?
The permit officer, I don't know the name.
Okay. Do you know if it has to be approved by zoning in order to be put up?
No, it does not.
Okay.
The application is online as of 2 years ago.
All right. Now, this is going to kind of be out of order. I have an exhibit which has been previously marked A6. Do you know what this document is, Grant? By looking at it? If you don't, I can ask them.
Yeah, it's an approval for the tent structure from, I don't see the date, right?
Should be
97.
97. I would ask the board just if, at this point, I did get this from Mr. Pfeiffer. He submitted it to me. If he could state on the record that this is a true and correct copy of the tent application from 1997, for authentication purposes, I would appreciate that.
Certainly, it is a true and correct copy of the tent permit application from 1997.
So, based on Exhibit A6, Grant, that tent structure has been in use since at least 1997.
Yes.
Okay. And do you know what do you use that tent structure for? What events take place?
For special events, everything from business conference events to meetings to weddings, student parents having celebrations after college and things like that.
All right. And during your time from owning the hotel from 2002 on, you've always got that tent permit application?
Yes.
You've always had those events in that space?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever been cited by zoning for a violation?
No.
Okay. Any letters from code enforcement from the city?
No.
And by that application, it's fair to say that the city's aware of what you're doing in that space.
Yes.
So now you're before the board, you want to build a permanent structure. Why do you want to build a permanent structure now?
For the last 18 years, we have been doing events, but the event business has changed dramatically. In addition to that, circumstances for a seasonal tent have changed dramatically. The traffic on 378 has increased exponentially, as well as the noise, and it makes it very difficult to have an elegant affair under tent because of that noise.
So let me just break it down so the record's clear. So you talked about the timing of events has changed. Why don't you tell the board how has this changed since 2002 or since 1992 when the variance was first granted?
Over 50% of our inquiries are outside of that seasonal window, and we are unable to accommodate them. So late fall season, early spring season, and of course, the winter holiday seasons, we are unable to accommodate them. And as that has moved, additionally, weddings, which it used to be traditional for a June, July wedding, that has now moved to be spring and fall events and holiday events as the preferred time. And so those business changes have made it necessary for us to consider this, which we also think will be a real asset to the building.
All right. So you said it's changed. So are you saying in your experience when you first came into the hospitality business, you had your weddings were focused in the June, July months?
Yes.
And now I think your testimony was it's early, late spring, late fall.
Yeah, and the holiday seasons, of course.
Okay. All right. Now you also talked about noise, and so where's the hotel located?
On 378 and West 3rd Street.
And can you see 378 from the building?
Yes, you can.
So tell me about, so you first bought the mansion in 2002?
Yes.
How was traffic on 378 in 2002?
Well, it was busy, but obviously not as busy. I think the traffic count increased. I don't have the exact figures, but that's been cited numerous times about the increase and also the noise factor in regards to the fact that there's increased ambulance and traffic and noise in that regard as well.
Would it be fair to say since 2002 or since 1991 that the population in this particular area has gone up?
Yes, of course. Mhm.
And that has led, in your experience, that there's been a significant increase in traffic on 378?
Yes.
And you said it's noise, how does that affect your events when you have them in the tent space?
For an outdoor tent event, it's fine for festival, music fest and that kind of thing. But for an elegant affair, it becomes much more difficult because it's intrusive nature.
So you're saying that the traffic as it stands today, the increase in noise is intrusive for your event space?
True.
Do you lose events because of that traffic noise?
Yes.
Now, I want you to talk about, so you own more than just the Sayre Mansion?
We own the Sayre Mansion Carriage House next door.
Do you own any other historic hotels in the area?
Not in the immediate area, but in Northeast Pennsylvania, we own 4 other historic hotels.
Do those historic hotels that you operate have event space areas?
Yes, they do.
Okay. All of them?
All of them in one form or another, yes.
Would the addition of a permanent structure to house events, would that generate a additional source of income?
Of course, yes, it would.
Would it,
It would also do a few things in regards to the neighborhood. It would decrease any obtrusive noise from our events to the neighborhood, although we do very strictly follow the city noise ordinances.
and with the addition of a permanent structure, would you be able to house events all year long?
Yes,
Would that meet the needs of the current market?
yes,
Would it meet it more effectively than with the semi-permanent structure?
yes, it would.
Now, did you hire a company to do a design of the conservatory?
We did.
Okay. And I'm going to hand you what's been previously marked exhibit.
I know. You want the rendering?
Yes.
It's in the back.
Maybe I don't have that as an exhibit.
Oh, here, why don't we just put them up
Right.
then?
For the record, I'm putting up a rendering of the Sayer Mansion with the proposed conservatory. I will advise the board that this is a prior version. The new proposed conservatory actually has a patio, so the building footprint isn't as large, but the design of the building will be the same. I want the board to have an idea of what it's going to look like. Grant, if you could step up.
Could I ask you to use the back? People see it? Yeah, a little bit.
Thank you.
I have your name, sir.
Richard Rucknick.
Thank you.
Attorney Roberts, the board does have that particular drawing in one of their older version packets.
Okay.
Do you
Okay.
want to give that a
Next
specific
would be the next one.
exhibit? Okay.
Exhibit A9?
Correct.
Yes, A9, if I could.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Board, I appreciate it. Is this a fair and accurate representation of the rendering that you had?
Yes, it is.
Now, when you designed, or you put some thought into the design of the conservatory?
Yes, as a matter of fact, when we went from a traditional tent to a semi-permanent structure, which is an open frame tent, on footers, we already were working on the idea of a conservatory concept as the most appropriate concept to be attached to Sayer Mansion. We purposely set the idea away from the mansion so that there is the least amount of obstruction of viewscape for the mansion because of its historic importance. And we felt it was important to be sensitive. You can't exactly replicate something built in 1858, but you can have a very architecturally sympathetic building associated with it.
Was that your goal when you put forth this? So point out for the board, if you could, some design features that you chose that complement the mansion.
Yeah, and maybe I can show this, which is another viewscape. One of the things about choosing a conservatory style was that on the other end of the building, Mr. Sayer's library was lit by a glass conservatory. And so the idea was to try to give a similar feel of glass and skylight to the structure so that it fit with the historic building as closely as possible.
And does that design, in your opinion, do you feel that that design reflects and complements the mansion as it currently?
Yes, we do. We do. We're very happy with it, and we're very excited about it, of course.
Do you feel that that additional building takes away from the historic nature of Sayer Mansion?
We do not.
Do you think it complements it?
Yes.
And I'm going to hand you what's been marked Exhibit A8. Is that an accurate representation of the Sayer Mansion with the white tent as it
Yes.
exists?
Yes. The current tent.
Okay. I don't have this one up, board. I apologize. Does the conservatory as proposed look better than what is currently depicted on Exhibit A8?
Yes, it's a market improvement, of course, in the character of the neighborhood, which is so critical.
And just a very hopefully a simple clarification. When I look at the actual tent
Mm-hmm.
and the proposed conservatory,
Yes.
are they located in the same place?
They are in the same place, and the square footage is very similar. There's only a 564 square foot difference.
But if I'm looking
Yes.
at the actual tent, that's where
It
I was.
is exactly where right,
Thank
correct.
you.
And just for everybody's clarification, and I'll put up this now. Exhibit A3,
This one?
you had a site plan done for this?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And it was done by Van Cleef Engineering?
Yes, it was.
And I'm handing you what's been marked Exhibit A3. Can you tell the board what that is?
Yes, that is the site plan on the current property showing that it conforms to all the requirements for setbacks and such for the city ordinances.
And where that proposed conservatory is located in Exhibit A3 on that site plan is the same spot where the current seasonal tent is located.
Yes, it is.
And you did testify that the conservatory is proposed to be slightly larger?
Yeah, an addition of 564 square feet.
Does that include the patio? Is that 564?
That's the building proper.
And if they note, you can look at it that the proposed patio is in front, which is why the rendering isn't quite accurate. The building is proposed to look that way, although it'll be back farther.
It'll be set back further than in the rendering.
You can sit down.
Again.
So, message, do you anticipate, what anticipated increase in events do you anticipate to have if the conservatory is built?
We do, of course, hope to increase events, but more importantly, we hope to offset the decrease that has been taking place because of the seasonality of the tent and the traffic issues, et cetera.
And do you believe that the addition of this conservatory will meet current customer needs?
Yes.
May I have a moment? Board? Thank you. So when you have events currently in the seasonal tent structure, do you know what the maximum capacity is?
The maximum capacity is 150, and on the new structure, we expect to self-impose that same restriction, even though the size of the building being slightly larger, it could accommodate more. There's a sensitivity that's necessary for the Sayre Mansion when we do events to not overuse the historic structure and wear it down.
I'm sorry, would you tell me the capacity on the proposed new structure again, please?
I think it allows for 192, but we expect to cap at 150. We do most of these things by contract.
And that's because you're concerned about preserving the historic structure.
Yes, it is.
It gets brittle as it gets older.
Yes,
So we're not asking. All right, and the current tent you said is 150.
150.
So with that self-imposed restriction, there'd be no increase in event sizes.
No.
All right, sorry, another. So just a couple more questions, and that's dangerous coming from a lawyer because a couple more would be here all night. But so I'm going to ask you, so in your current marketing of the hotel, have you come to some preliminary agreement with Lehigh University?
Yes.
And that is to do what?
Be a preferred hotel of the university and host some of their special events that are necessary off campus.
And does Lehigh University, has Lehigh University ever approached you in the past as being a preferred hotel?
Yes, we've worked with them for quite a while. They're a big business customer of ours, obviously.
Okay. And have they, in their experience working with them for a while, changed their expectations on where events to be held?
Yes.
Are they looking for are they in their current environment? And you said they've been working with them for years?
Yes.
And that's to change over years. They're looking for a permanent structure. Is that a fair statement?
The permanent structure would satisfy their desire to do events within their school year. And that's true of the other universities in the area, which are outside the seasonal tent timeframe.
So just last question. Do you believe that this conservatory addition is necessary based on a change in circumstances since you first purchased the property in 2002 or since 1991 when it was first granted the use variance?
Yes.
And the use as an event space has been ongoing since at least 1997.
Yes.
I have no more questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Will you be providing heat and air conditioning in this new
Yeah,
section?
yes, which is also a limitation in a seasonal tent. You can do it, but it's not the optimum issue for an elegant affair.
Right now, do you provide heat and cooling, and how do you do that?
We do provide heat and cooling if, as the customers requested, by remote units outside the tent.
With those like flame propane units?
Yeah, they're like a gas, hot air.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Sure.
Currently, how many events a year do you schedule with underneath the tent?
We average 20 to 25 events a year. Not all of those are under tent. Some of those are in our conference facility only. And when we do events, we do not book more than one event. If there's an event under tent, we do not do an event in our small conference facility, and vice versa.
Do you have an estimate as to how many events you could book a year if the structure were to be granted?
Probably double, but I don't have a concrete estimate.
One concern that I had when you mentioned Lehigh University, are the events that are sponsored for Lehigh University basically adult related, or are they student functions?
I'm sorry. I apologize. We'll answer your question. Justin Genslinger is here. He's better prepared to answer business related questions.
I'll hold
He's been sworn in.
I'll hold the question then.
I didn't plan on calling him. I thought Grant got to everything, but if you have
Let us finish with your first witness, but I'd appreciate that we might ask the other gentleman. If you don't
sorry, I
mind.
didn't mean to cut you off.
So I'll defer to Justin.
Okay. That's fine. I'll ask the question. I'll go with my line of questioning then when you present the other witness.
Yeah, when we're done with the question, if you could clarify that. If I could, since there was a time when you weren't allowed to prepare food at all, and then the ruling was breakfast, what was furnished in the events in the tent?
We have a preferred caterer that we mandate be used for all events, and they currently, under an ancillary temporary tent, do all of their preparation. This structure would allow them to do it in a preparation hall. They do not use our kitchen for anything other than staging.
So the food preparation and service itself would be identical to what's being offered in the tent?
Yes, it would be. And we've used the same caterer for the last 18 years.
So you have a catering kitchen on your plan. What is that?
It's not a catering kitchen. It's a catering commissary, if you will, a staging area for the caterers who bring the food on site from their commissary.
So basically warmers, there's no like open fryers. No
They're
hood.
catering, no, there's none of that. Okay.
I think he'll give you a better idea using the site plan.
Where the structure connects by this whole area to the back of the main building is where the catering preparation area would be, which currently is where their seasonal tent gets set up for them to stage their execution of the events.
Is there already a cement pad there
Here,
in the back?
yes.
Underneath the main tent, what's your floor?
We don't have that. We don't have that fully executed yet, but polished concrete or something.
Oh no, I mean like
Oh,
under
the
the
current
tent.
tent is a flagstone patio. I'm sorry.
Okay. Is it pretty level? Like do you,
Yeah, as level as a flagstone patio is.
I guess what I'm getting at, do you have any issues with people with disabilities?
The current tent is fully accessible, and the 3 restrooms we have in the main building for our tent, our events now, we have 1 handicapped accessible restroom as well.
You are compliant then with ADA?
Yes.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Yeah, real quick. You said you were members of different clubs and groups. Are they also going to have to approve this addition and have an architectural review?
Not an architectural review, no, but we do get inspected by both those organizations on a regular basis. But we do not need approval for the addition.
And are some of those requirements preserving the mansion?
Yes, that is the primary focus, especially Historic Hotels of America.
All right. And is the cap of 150 for guests not including employees? Or are you going to cap everyone at 150?
It includes our employees, but not the caterers, if that's what you're asking me, that when they come on site, they bring their people. Okay. Justin can answer that more fully as well.
All right.
Seems like we're rapidly coming to just in time here.
Is there any more?
Do we have any more questions of Mr. Enslinger?
I do have 2 questions if the board's done.
Okay. Mr. Pfeiffer.
Thank you. Mr. Genslinger, you mentioned that you had retained Van Cleef Engineers. Is part of their scope of work a stormwater study?
We have agreed with our neighbors to, as we would have anyway, to do a stormwater plan. Van Cleef probably will be doing the work because they already did the site plan and the stormwater plan next door. But yes, somebody will be engaged to do that and present to the city.
And you expect that you would submit that to the city and the city engineers for their review?
Correct.
Okay. The second question, last question I have is, can you explain to the board how you currently handle off-street parking?
The approval in 91 was the mandate that we have 30 parking spaces. We have 32 currently on the main building property. Large events, we mandate under contract valet parking. We don't permit people to just show up and park all over the place. It's mandated, and the clients sign that they agree to the valet parking. It's part of our contract.
To clarify that, the drop-off point is actually on your premises, is it not?
Right at the front door.
Yes. All right.
If I may add to the zoning officer's question about stormwater, that was a concern for the Wilbur Mansion property. Between the last hearing where there was a continuance granted by this board, we have come to a written agreement. All stormwater pursuant to that agreement needs to be drafted by an engineer and submitted for approval by the city before construction can begin.
Okay, why don't we ask the other gentleman to clarify? I think we have to go back to Mr. Shantz's question first.
Can you state your name for the record?
Justin Genslinger.
And what's your position within Sayer Mansion?
I'm the CEO and managing partner for Settlers Hospitality Group, and which includes Sayer Mansion.
All right. And I believe your point earlier is you can handle the business end of the things.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, since you're more of the CEO and the business end, would you agree with Grant that the older this building becomes, the more expensive it becomes to maintain?
Yes.
Okay. And that increases year over year?
Yes.
And would you agree that you needed?
Can we hold in?
You know what? I thought we were just answering Mr. Shantz's 2 questions.
All right.
Because we should see if the audience has any
Why don't we
questions
go
of
back
this
to
witness.
format? And that was my intention.
Okay,
So
I apologize.
Don't worry about it.
if we could, at this point, I would open up the floor for our members of the audience to question the testimony offered
Sure.
by the first witness. Please identify yourself and your address, please.
George Roxandich, 435 West 3rd Street, adjacent to the property, just west.
Okay, sir.
I get, one of the questions I have is, I understand there's valet parking, but is there any designation as to where the valet parking is? Previously, the Masonic Temple and their property was part of that. Then the Shabbat next door was where the parking was. Where are these folks going? Is there street parking? Are they able to street park is one of my questions.
the valet companies, which are certified within the city, make arrangements for their valet parking. A number of the cars are parked on our property, and there will be an arrangement with someone else for others. I do not believe that they use street parking.
Okay. I want to make a quick comment. We've been there for quite a while. We've gone through more of these than I care to remember. One of the things I share with the gentleman from the Hotel Bethlehem is the fact that many times properties that have been, for example, Ronka got in a,
Mr. Oksandich, I'm sorry to interrupt
Go
you.
the chase
I
at
really
the
want to
end.
limit it to questions, and we'll give you an opportunity at the end of the questioning.
the other question is any garbage or any of that sort of thing is going to be right adjacent to the property, correct? It's not going to be moved back up or is it going to be moved away from the property? I would.
Our refuge area is going to stay where it is.
Stay where it is. Okay. And is there going to be additional, is there going to be any additional, oh, never mind. I think you've answered that already. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the audience? Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to go back to the parking question.
But as a
Bruce
former-
Haynes,
Thank you.
63 West Church Street.
Thank you.
So again, I would like to understand, I know you have 32 spaces on property, and with a 150 person event, the expected amount of cars would be around 100 for, at least from our experience, for 150 people, not to mention, and you're with your caterers included, plus your overnight hotel guests. So the point, I'm trying to understand where this valet parker took the other 70 cars this summer to park.
On the site plan, we have the parking data of what would be required versus what we have. And as I mentioned, mitigating factors, the total parking need was 77 spaces for this proposal. Our current parking, which is approved for our current tenant, 150, was the mandate of 30 spaces. We have 32. Mitigating that, our conference room requires 10 parking spaces, but we do not double book events. The 19 guest rooms, 90% of those guests are part of the events. So there is a reduction in that 19 space need. We do have in the back of the property the ability to park on grass and gravel for an additional 10 spaces. I don't know.
So I guess what I understand is you have 42 on property. I know the numbers you're quoting represent the city parking requirement.
Yes.
Based on your 150 people and the number of rooms you have, et cetera. Is that?
They're on the site plan, correct?
And those are cities. So you have a shortfall during your events today you have anyway, that have to be handled off-site. Did you not park your cars off-site on the Wilbur Mansion last year and the year before and the year before that? The valet parker?
Yeah, my son Justin can answer that, but yes, we've had valet parking companies who have made arrangements with neighboring properties to park some of the cars, the valets park on our property, but are managed by the valet parkers, not people just arriving and parking all over the place.
So I guess I would ask Justin, do you have parking
Mr.
agreements?
Haynes, we're not talking to
We'll come
Justin.
back to him.
Because we're going to
Oh, I'm
get
sorry.
testimony from him, and then we'll open it up for his questions. Okay? Thank you.
So the parking to be further discussed.
If you want to ask Justin, yes.
Okay, I get it. So you talked about the increased cost every year with older properties. not quite sure why you say they increase every year. I mean, if you maintain, maintenance is maintenance. Could you explain why this increase is a hardship, Because presumably you're looking for a hardship, otherwise you don't get a variance.
I'm not sure the direction of that question, but it goes without saying that a building built in 1858 has complexities of maintenance that are not necessarily true of standard, as you referred to it, daily maintenance or capital replacement maintenance. So they're unique, unlike many other properties.
So have you been able to increase your room rates in the last 6 years like the rest of the Lehigh Valley to help to generate
I think
income?
my son who's in operations, can deal with that. I'm
Okay.
prepared to have to answer any questions on the plans or whatever.
How about the capital investment for this property? Could you reveal to us the capital investment you're making in the new property as opposed to putting it in the preserved building?
Justin will answer questions of business, but I'm not sure what the relevance of that is to what we're.
The
here
relevance
tonight
is
for.
you're trying to suggest that you have a hardship in maintaining this building, yet you're coming up with a substantial amount of cash to build a brand new building. That amount of money conceivably could have been put into the existing building to maintain it.
I don't concur with that,
Asking
but my
for-
son can answer that.
Okay.
I don't know where we're going.
Hold on. Stop. Hold on, so you guys remember one at a time.
Okay.
So, all of it. No problem.
I think his question really goes to my argument at the end. I don't know if Mr. Genslinger, all due respect to him, is qualified to really argue that point.
Okay.
It's sustained.
Now, the next question then, the noise increase that you refer to over the past whatever years, will you have any data on that? I mean, cars are now quieter than they were 10 years ago. If Bethlehem were enforcing their noise ordinance, can you really justify that there's more noise today than there were 10 years ago? What are the facts behind that allegation?
I don't really have an answer for that other than stand in my front yard and listen to the traffic.
But I'm sure if you stood in your front yard 10 years ago, you would have been hearing the traffic.
It was far less.
Okay, next question. In your application for tonight's agenda, I believe it indicated that there was going to be 2,890. The banquet facility was going to be 2,890 square feet. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have the agenda in front of me. Perhaps somebody could you please read the.
If it helps, it's listed as 2,880 square
Okay.
feet.
Okay, so I stand corrected, 2,880. By your own drawings over there, the tent, presumably you're alleging that those drawings are correct, that the tent, is it correct that the tent was 30 by 60, which is 1,800 square feet?
That's not correct.
So that's an incorrect application?
No, in our documentation, we note that the existing tent is 33 by 66.
Not on that particular one that was handed out as an exhibit. Is that correct then? That's a different documentation? I'm looking at the one that was handed out as an exhibit, the yellow document. Which
This is a historic document. It's not relevant to the current tent configuration. This is from 1997.
Okay, so the current tent is presumably roughly, you said it's 564 square feet less than what the 2,880 that you're proposing. So the current tent's
594 square feet less. I'm reading it now, the new structure is 2,880. and the current tent is 2286.
Okay. And so your current structure, by your own admission, is you could easily fit 192 people. You could fit 192 people versus 150, but you are going to self-control attendance. How is that enforced by the city of Bethlehem? Because that's an additional 40 people, at least 20 some more cars.
I've been advised by my client that if that is a concern, it sounds like a concern by Mr. Haynes, we'd agree, if this board would be so inclined to approve our request and grant our relief tonight, that we'd agree to a condition that the event be capped at 150 attendees.
And we have that in our contracts as well with the clients, the number of people in attendance.
That would give the ability of the city to enforce it with the zoning violation if they showed up and there was 180 people there.
You indicated you would only be booking one event at the property. If in fact you're having an event in this new facility, that you won't be booking people in the 100-person conference room or 40-person conference room, I'm sorry, in the basement.
Yeah, I'll refer that to my son, but we book one client at a time, if that's your question.
Okay, I'll defer back to parking with Justin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haynes. Any other questions from members of the audience? Seeing none, could we move on to your next witness?
Sure. At this time, I call Justin Genslinger. All right, so what is your position at Sayre Mansion?
The CEO and managing partner.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you. Would you agree with Grant's testimony that the maintenance on the building, the price of maintenance, cost of maintenance on a historic building such as this increases over time?
Yes.
Okay. And would you agree with Grant that it's important to diversify your sources of income?
Yes.
Okay. And would it be a fair statement to say that as time goes on, you need to have more sources of income?
Yes.
Would it be consistent to have, or more consistent forms of income?
More consistent.
Okay. And this proposed conservatory, would it provide a more consistent source of income for Sayre Mansion?
Yes.
Why is that?
It eliminates seasonality.
Okay. And seasonality is currently what you're working with?
Yes, the tent.
And it's been appropriate in the past, that seasonality?
It was more appropriate in the past and less so now.
How is it less so now based on your experience operating the hotel?
Similar as Grant Genslinger mentioned, it's their guests often like to book in the spring and fall. I think there's less, in my experience, there's less tendency to accept non-air conditioned, non-heated space, rain plans that are not as optimal as primary plans, and just and being able to capture key times of year that's consistent with the community's known values, such as the holiday season is a perfect example. So all of the above are reasons to want to be able to conduct the same type of business year round to enhance that consistency.
Would it be fair to say that hasn't always been the case?
I would say it is more consistent now. I mean, would it have always been better to have a building? Yes. However, it's become more and more of a problem not to have one, is how I would characterize it.
So as the years are going, it's more of a problem now than it was.
Yes,
And that's just
absolutely.
the change in your customers?
I think it's the change of the change in the demand. Yes.
And would this more consistent source of income help you to better preserve the historic nature of the mansion?
Yes.
And that's keeping with your company's, I assume your company's principle is, you own more than just the Sayre Mansion?
Yes, we do.
You own more historic hotels?
Yes, we do.
And would it be fair to say, to tell the board that your concern is preserving those?
Yes, and it's part of our values that are published on our website and all of our materials.
And that purpose will be better served by this conservatory.
Absolutely, yes.
And have you been involved since you first purchased property in 2002?
No, I've not.
When did you come aboard?
With the Sayre Mansion specifically in 2018.
Okay. Are you aware of any citations from the city for zoning violations based on your use of the event space?
No, I'm not.
And you don't have a commercial kitchen on property, do you?
No, we do not.
It's just a kitchen to serve breakfast to your residents?
Yes, consistent with Grant's testimony, and what we're looking to do pro forma going forward is also consistent with what we do today in respect to the kitchen.
So none of the food from the caterers at these events will be prepared, like cooked on site? No frying, I think was it.
Absolutely not. We don't have fryers on site, and our preferred caterer, or if we were to allow any other caterers, they prepare the food in a licensed commercial kitchen.
And as a businessman, do you deal with the contracts with outside, contractors?
Yes.
You deal with the contracts with valets?
Yes.
All right. So when you hire a valet company to park when you have an event, how do they handle where to park the cars to valet? Do you have any control over that?
In general, no. The valet companies are expert in parking and doing that aspect of it. So we have a particular scope that we're of services, and we look for them to conduct the parking. That's what we hire them to do. I think I can also say that in the past, the valet companies that we have worked with, not only in other areas, but in Bethlehem, have worked with other property owners to procure parking, as well as work within the property that we own.
Now, in your other historic hotels that you own and operate, do they all have event spaces?
Yes.
Okay. And do you find the event space today necessary to have this kind of business?
Yes.
Do people who call or visit your hotel expect to have this kind of event space?
Those clients who call the hotel looking to hold events look for indoor year-round space, and so yes.
I have no more questions.
Questions from members of the board? I think we had a couple that were unanswered previously.
Is there a limit to how many valet spots you offer? Like, does it max out?
Well, I guess the theoretical max would be the number of spaces we have on property versus the number of guests that would be capped, as we've discussed. And so that would be the theoretical maximum number of valet spaces that we would need.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
Yeah, if like the valet company is going to go valet a car, do they have 100 spots available? Or
we always make sure that they know and they have privy to the contract, as well as the number of guests. So, it's their responsibility to make sure that they have enough parking for the number of guests that are RSVP'd. Yes.
Okay.
Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of a follow-up on that, Mr. Genslinger. You're currently utilizing valet service for the tent?
We would, yes.
You have been?
Yes, we have.
Have you gotten any complaints with regard to the parking during the events?
Not to my knowledge.
You've not been cited by the city in any
No.
case? Thank you. Mr. Shantz, I know you've been sitting on a question here for a while. You've been very patient.
Thank you, which is unusual for me. I guess I had several concerns when you mentioned Lehigh University.
Okay.
In the past couple of weeks, they've gotten quite a black eye considering the abuse of alcohol on campus, the abuse, basically the cracking down on Greek life on campus, basically the total alcohol prohibition right now on campus. Do any of your functions involve Lehigh students, renting out to Lehigh students?
I mean, today our functions have included Lehigh students. I think if your question is the primary or is the goal to increase that? No. And is the transactions referenced by Grant's testimony with Lehigh University regarding student activity. It's not. It's with trustees, with professors, with business partners that do business with the university, and to a degree with visiting parents, but that would be an indirect transaction.
So you have no intention of deliberately going out and canvassing the sororities, the fraternities to that, hey, we have a new banquet hall, have your party here?
No. Matter of fact, there are 26 different contacts listed in the agreement, and they're all either associated with academic or business services.
Does your current caterer who comes in have an off-premise catering permit to serve alcohol?
No. However, we have in our business in other locations, we do and have filed that, as have other caterers that have gone outside. And then there are provisions for BYO alcohol. All of our food and beverage staff are by requirement RAMP certified, and our managers are also voluntarily ServSafe certified, and we're insured as such. So we carry more than the required, and I would argue sufficient insurance for liquor liability. And it's, we operate 5 different restaurants with liquor licenses and 6 different catering venues with liquor that is served in-house outside of this Air Mansion. And if we were to cater on property, or if the guests bring their own, or if the caterer would file a day permit, we require them to have a manager that is manager RAMP certified to oversee the event, whether the guest brings it or it's served by purchasing it.
On average, how many events a year do you think that you serve alcohol at?
Actually, most of the 25 that Grant referenced in his testimony. However, all I can say is I don't think that our reputation is of a crazy or raucous party place, and that's not the intent going forward. And I think our prices and the style of the mansion kind of reflect that. But I can't say that our intention is to never do business with any students, but it's just not our main line of business.
That reassures me. Thank you very much for your.
Okay. I'm happy to follow up on that.
Thank you.
Well, I did want to revisit starting where you are now with the tent versus your new conservatory.
Yeah.
What changes in terms of what you're going to serve in that structure? Food and
In term-
beverage wise,
Nothing.
nothing changes.
Hopefully just more of it over the course of the year.
But still 150 max.
Yeah,
in-
per event, nothing. Yeah.
I do have one follow-up question. Since you do have a detailed experience at running restaurants and have liquor licenses,
Sure.
does this site eventually look forward to obtaining a liquor license itself?
Not in the current plan, but I wouldn't say to rule it out. I don't think the construct of the existing property and its in the lots in the property that we own now, I think we were in front of you before on a pro forma basis, that would have, but this is for catering and lodging only. It is our experience and it is what we do, and I would hope to expand our presence in the Lehigh Valley, but not on this particular property in its current size.
So under the current model, you would not have plans to eventually turn this conservancy into a restaurant?
No, that is not the plan.
Thank you.
If I could just elaborate on that answer, though. So in all of our cases where we do have a la carte restaurant service, we have separate designated square footage and event space. And it's very hard for us to operate effectively where we have to try and do both in one space. So if we were to try and expand the presence of this Air Mansion, whether it be contiguous or on property or elsewhere, we do keep our a la carte service and our event space generally separate as a practice.
Thank you very much.
Can you clarify, in an ideal world, all of the approvals, or whatever would happen, when is the conservatory open for business?
In its most ideal world, it would be for the late fall of 2020. But I think we've been here a few times, so I'm guessing it's probably more like 2021.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Last bite at the apple. Any questions from members of the board?
One more, please.
Yes, sir.
With your architect's rendering, I noticed the front of the mansion is basically a brick coated front of the mansion. Have there been any plans to basically model the front facade of the conservancy along those same guidelines, that it would be brick as opposed to just the open glass?
No, reason being you will see the knee wall, if you will, which would be from table height down to the ground, is brick, and as are the columns on the exterior. But the glass facade in the front with the Gothic style windows is consistent architecturally and also provides from the inside of the viewscape a view to some of Bethlehem's best, or South Bethlehem's best assets in terms of steel stacks and to an extent the river and the wonderful Hotel Bethlehem.
You're not planning to try to put the Hotel Bethlehem out of business, are you?
No, I'm a rising tides guy.
Okay.
Bruce, we can debate that at the conference though.
Thank you very much. Oh, and one other question. Are those solar panels on the roof?
What's that?
Are those solar panels on the roof?
I wish they were, but they're meant to be. They're glass skylights to show the conservatory effect.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions from members of the board? This time, questions from members of the audience. Yeah, Mr. Haynes.
Okay, back to parking.
Back to parking.
So obviously, when you have events, Justin, you exceed your capacity on site, no question. What I'm hearing is that you just abrogate. To me, the city has very strict parking requirements, especially that you're outside the central business district. So I don't understand. You're trying to tell me that it's up to the valet parkers to find parking, and that the city doesn't hold you accountable to have a contract to have space available in a reasonable distance from the property. This is something that you have contracts with anyone yourself for parking going forward?
To date, our valet parking contracts have been at a variable or per diem rate as opposed to a preferred contract.
No, I'm saying, do you have space? Have you parked in the past at the Wilbur Mansion? Have your cars been parked by the valet?
I've parked
parkers?
many times at the Wilbur Mansion.
Okay, so in the
I'm
future,
not sure I understand the question.
the question is, do you have off-site space designated for moving forward for 12 months of the year for the excess cars that are going to have to be taken back out onto 3rd Street and taken somewhere? And it seems to me that you have an obligation to have spaces to qualify assigned. Do you have space for your off-site parking?
What we are proposing, which is the same that we have done for through 2 generations and 17 years plus, is utilize the parking we have on premise plus professional parking assistance. And that's our plan. That's what we're proposing. And I'm not sure what else you want to hear from me, but.
Well, I would think the city, you're going to have to demonstrate to the city. Does this go before the planning commission? If you approve the zoning change, can I just ask?
There's not a formal planning review process for this particular project.
There is?
Is not.
There is not. So they're building a major addition on a non-conforming lot that doesn't conform to, and there's no requirement for on-site parking for this. There's no planning review of this.
There is a planning review by members of the planning department. There is off-street parking requirements that apply. The applicant has demonstrated on their site plan how they do comply, or how many parking spaces are required. I have reviewed that document and found that to be a true and correct result of studying the zoning ordinance. However, the applicant actually failed in one section wherein the off-street parking for hotels does permit, and I'll just take a second here to read this, up to 50% of the parking required by supplemental uses may be met by parking spaces for the sleeping rooms. That actually deducts the total number of parking spaces required, goes from 58 less 29, I'm sorry, less 29 less 19 down to 10. So as the
What-
zoning
what-
ordinance considers this, they're deficient by 10.
No, half, I thought 77 was the total number of parking spaces that they require.
Correct. So
They have 41 on property,
the
right?
ordinance allows you to double dip, basically use the same space twice.
I understand, but the 8/10, the hotel is 8/10 of the number of rooms. They have 21 rooms times 8/10 is basically 17 spaces. So they can get a credit for half of that, which is 8 spaces. Not 29 spaces, not 21 spaces, but 8 spaces. There's still a deficit. There is a significant offset, and the city requirement is not really representative of the actual spaces they're going to need when they have 150 people in the space. And particularly if it's 150 that aren't associated with people staying just for casual weekend.
All right.
So
Mr. Pfeiffer, why don't you clarify the first point that Mr. Haynes raised with you?
you agree there's still a deficit,
Correct.
and but I disagree with your deduction. So my question really is, don't they have an obligation to provide the space where that space is, as opposed to saying we're leaving it to our valet parkers to find parking somewhere in the city?
So what,
The question for Mr. Pfeiffer.
well, I will try.
Hold on, hold on.
Wait.
Yeah.
Let me just answer this. That is part of the requested relief tonight. So he'll address that and as to how they believe the parking that's being provided is sufficient. Because it's the old decision, is I think what their argument
It is, what I would say is the old decision mandates 30 space parking lot will be provided in the rear yard of the lot,
Right.
which was part of the relief we were granted. We're not asking to disturb that. There's actually 32 spots currently. There is a section on the site plan, which I believe Grant talked about, where we could get 10 or 11 more spots. And it would be our position based on the testimony with the parking that the Sayre Mansion hires a valet. As part of the valet's contract, it's their job to park the cars. I think the question from the chairman, Mr. Fitzpatrick said, have you ever been cited? No, it's the valet company's job. That's what they're in business to do. I'm sure they're not, the Sayre Mansion is the only property in the city of Bethlehem or in Allentown or in the Lehigh Valley they operate, and they understand that I'm sure they have contracts with parking lots or parking providers throughout the city where they take the cars. And that's the reason that the Sayre Mansion hires the valet parking so there's not overflow parking or parking on the street, and it's mandated. So the relief we're requesting is not to disturb that variance relief that was granted. I know it was 1991, it's a long time ago, but they've been compliant with that since that 1991 decision.
Let me ask, did the 1991 variance comprehend a tent with a slab with a tent and 150 people?
I believe the testimony today was that tent structure has been ongoing since at least 1997, as we have an application for. I believe Grant Genslinger's testimony has been approved and the tent structure has been there since the 1991 or 1992 season. And there hasn't, based on the testimony, and Mr. Pfeiffer, correct me if I'm wrong, there hasn't been any zoning violations. And no complaints from residents or citations from the city. So I believe it would be my argument that they've been in compliance with the 1991 variance with the 30 spots and manage the extra parking from the events that have taken place for close to 30 years.
Okay, but I come back to, has that parking been done on the essentially abandoned Wilbur Mansion and the Sonic Temple parking spaces, which is no longer going to be available?
I think I've already answered the question how I intend to, so. And I think our attorney has already.
Let me ask you, I think it was answered, Mr. Haynes, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did answer before that those spaces have been used
In the past.
in the past.
But now you have a Wilbur Mansion that's going to be
No,
developed.
I understand that, but all I'm saying is your answer is they may have been used in the past, but we're continuing, and it is the obligation to go find some other place by the entity that does this for you. Is that your answer?
Yeah, it is,
Okay.
and it is one of many places that have been used in the past. It is
Okay.
not the sole place that has been used in the past.
I just want to know what are the places that are going to be used in the future.
Could be one of many places where there's parking that valets are allowed to operate, Bruce. I really am looking to be the end of this line of discussion, but I think it's been asked and answered.
I don't think it's been answered. You don't have a place. You don't have a parking place to give to the city, to tell the city where your cars that can't fit on your lot are going to be parked. And parking is a key part of the city.
But let's hold this up a moment. I think it's been answered, Mr. Haynes, that you are correct. They do not have a place. And your position is the valet will do it. You may not like that answer, but that's their answer, right?
Can't believe the
city
would accept
that. Yeah.
That's my point. Or the zoning hearing board would accept.
In layman's terms, it's worked for 17 years.
Fine, thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the audience? Or did you have more, Mr. Haynes? No. Any other questions from members of the audience? Seeing none? Do you have any other witnesses?
No. No, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Yeah, not even
I'm used
close.
to being in court. I apologize.
So we'll move for the admission.
I would move for the admission of the exhibits included in that packet.
Yep.
Which is A1 through A9.
They're admitted.
And I,
Yeah, and in your close, if you would, when you opened the hearing, you talked about the 3 different areas for consideration. If you could at least address each of those.
Sure. So there's 3 different avenues that I would argue that Sayre Manch is entitled to the relief. And what we're asking for is zoning approval in front of this board to build that conservatory that we've talked about this evening. The first is under Bethlehem's zoning ordinance. I can give you the appropriate section. When you talk about an accessory building, which is
Right now.
13.
Excuse me a second. We need a break.
Just
Sure.
Give us about 5 minutes, would you please?
Okay.
Go ahead.
How are you doing?
Where's your day coming up?
What's up? Yeah.
Shortly.
Ready?
Good luck. my dear. Be looking over. It'll be great.
Yeah. I'm the stress out of it. Hard. So. Maybe I'll have coffee.
I mean,
Can I have coffee?
yeah, that's why I bring it. Sugar free.
Thank you so much.
Put them in your pocket.
Also, thanks for saving me.
Oh. I think I'm so hesitant. I was gonna ask like where the values go and they didn't ask. Just gotta. Okay, who's smart?
So far away.
Duh. I do think, I just don't. I feel
Just sit through dental stuff as he was getting that.
That'll pass.
Plan for 1, 2.
John's doing that.
Ask away.
I went to St. Louis at 8. People.
People just ask questions because they're interested.
Rattle rescue or
Yeah,
something.
I know, but I just.
Rainy night. Was he good?
I could do something.
Are you, yes. You're getting there.
Yeah, broadcasting to the world about my dental implant.
Leave it in makeup.
You put in a plug for this guy, how good he was. I'll have to charge him.
Tried not to moan, kept playing with my.
Not my form was. I didn't want to do it during the hearing.
I'm just gonna fill out my copy. I'm just gonna copy last year's and re-sign it.
Should go into the.
Is that the form or whatever?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You take a picture.
like John does. Someday he'll be 6'4". And middle linebacker, Penn State. Is that, oh no, he's not that big either.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Public official.
All right, not employee.
I'm like, I'm just dying. I go. You better check where you go. I know.
I swear to God, I must have, because they have 72 different medicines there.
Yeah, I thought you were getting a little unsettled over
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God.
All right, are we
It's
back on now?
there. We need an attorney and we need a zoning officer.
We're almost ready.
I have to go home. I have to.
Oh, here comes our zoning officer.
Was it?
No, I said, here comes Craig.
I guarantee
As
you.
an officer of the attorney. He's out there playing.
Yeah, I know.
He'll never make it home.
I know. And I was just, oh, that's hilarious. I gotta
Come on back.
All right.
Everybody's back. I
All right.
apologize, members.
Not a
Okay.
problem. Gene, we're back on the record, please.
I'm the one who called the timeout, so.
It's okay. So what I would ask, and I don't mean to go out of order, but would you take comments from the public before you want me to give my closing so I can address any comments the public has that are not related to any questions?
Oh, I thought he
Yeah.
called for it. Did they
Oh.
not?
No.
They said questions, so I don't know if there was.
Oh,
or
okay.
was there public
I
being
bet,
specific?
no, thanks for clarifying that.
I
You can do
didn't
that.
mean to step on that. Mr.
Okay.
Fitzpatrick.
No, not at all.
I just
Thank
want to be
you.
able to
You can
address
call
any
for him. Yep,
concerns. that
that's
may come
fine.
up.
I wonder if they're out in the hall.
Yeah, let me. I got it.
No, you should leave.
Yeah, we can keep that.
Somehow I felt like we had the testimony.
I felt it.
Yeah, you go now. We'll go last. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification and my apologies. At this time, we would open the floor for comments from members of the audience.
Hello, Casey Noble of 1800 Old Mill Road in Bethlehem. I'm part of the family that owns the Wilbur Mansion next to the Sayer Mansion. We've always been in support of their project, but we did have some concerns about the stormwater management. The Genslingers have been very cooperative in working together with us to make sure that an agreement is in place to address our concerns. So we'd like to publicly offer our support and wish them the best of luck with their project.
Thank you. Any other comments, testimony from members of the audience?
Okay, Bruce Haynes, 63 West Church Street. So what we have here is another case of the city of Bethlehem having before them a commercial request for a commercial variance for what is a non-conforming use on a residential piece of property in the city of Bethlehem. Been there, done that. Now here we are again. I would hope that you would think back to what your role is and whether you really heard that a hardship to get a variance, a use variance, is a very, very high threshold. This is expanding an existing variance, expanding the commercial coverage on a residential lot. it carries the very high threshold of a use variance. And essentially, they have to prove that they're going to go bankrupt if this doesn't happen. They have a high burden of proof. They certainly have not proven that. They certainly are not at a point where this operation is going to close. They certainly haven't made that case. They've only made the case that they can increase their business revenues by having a big year-round facility that would allow them to do more food and beverage business, which is less profitable than the hotel rooms that they have. So there isn't a hardship here. And if in fact there's really a hardship, they're probably investing, I don't know, several $1 million in this building that they could have been investing if they have that kind of available cash from their various businesses, could have been investing it in the mansion without increasing the commercial footprint on residential property. If the city of Bethlehem wanted this to be residential property, why don't they just rezone it as commercial, as opposed to deferring to you guys to constantly be just giving variances willy-nilly to anybody that comes before you that is trying to put a commercial operation on a residential piece of property. You know, right across the street, it's commercial. Expand the commercial. But I don't like the precedent, the continued precedent. You've already been shot down once by 2 West Market Street by the Commonwealth Court. And here you go again. Here we go again. And I don't understand why the city, I made this recommendation to the city. If you want a commercial operation there, you ought to be forthright and zone that block as commercial. You got the Wilbur Mansion in that block. You got these guys that are in that block operating, both of them operating in non-conforming use. And for you to continue to put yourself in a position where you are giving out variances for commercial and residential properties without a demonstrated hardship, and clearly there's been no demonstrated hardship. I can assure you that the price increases in the Lehigh Valley for rooms have gone up 40% in the last 6 years. They've participated in that. They are not hurting. They just want to do more business. There is no commercial hardship here. Read what a use variance requires. And this doesn't meet the test. It's as simple as that. And, you know, I think what you're doing is opening up the city to basically the point that no one can trust our zoning ordinances in the city, nor have any confidence that the properties designations in the city for commercial and residential have any integrity. And you've been contributing to that. And if you approve this tonight, you will further contribute to that. And I implore you to truly step back and think about what you're doing here, and that this does not meet the test for a hardship, for a use variance.
Did you have any questions for Mr. Haynes, Attorney Roberts?
No, I'll address his points in my closing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience wishing to make a statement, introduce testimony?
George Roxandich, I'll just say one thing, and basically what he said was correct. There have been variances for over and over again, not necessarily current owners or anything else, but there have been a number of variances in there for properties that had no reason, that were conforming properties, that there was the only reason to change them was to make more money than they would have made if they had done exactly what they were allowed to do. And it's something that that affects property owners around that area, and that is going to keep on going unless we do something with the zoning board where Okay, if it's going to be commercial, it's going to be commercial. I have a property there. Does that mean that if I go for a variance, I'll automatically get a variance for another use that might be commercial? That's my concern. I can't trust anything that goes on in that block. Never could. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Seeing no one else. And again, thank you for catching my error, and I do apologize to the members of the audience.
I just want to be able to address some concerns of the residents. And I'm not unsympathetic to the concerns of the residents, so I want to start my presentation, my closing presentation off with that. However, to address the Hotel Bethlehem's owner concern with the variance, we, through either of the three forms of relief I'm asking for, are not asking for a variance. We're not. We're not either in the accessory use context, the addition context, or the changing condition context. We are not asking for a variance. It is not incumbent upon us at this hearing, based on those arguments, to prove or demonstrate a hardship. The hardship was demonstrated in 1991. I understand the frustration with the zoning hearing board's granting of a use variance between our property and maybe the Wilbur Mancher property. I don't know what the status, but here that was best taken up in 1991 when the use variance was first granted. Now, when it comes to a use variance, the zoning hearing board is allowed to put conditions on the use variance when it grants it. It did so in this case. It said you cannot have a kitchen facility. That was amended in 2002, but said you cannot have a kitchen facility here. You can only serve a continental breakfast. It mandated you have to have 30 parking spots in the rear of the lot. Other than those conditions, it imposed no conditions on the use of the property at the time it made its decision in 1991. Now, Mr. Haynes talked about a non-conforming use. I wished it was a non-conforming use. It would be a much easier argument to make. A non-conforming use, I can appeal to the natural expansion of that use if it was in a properly zoned district. However, this is based on a variance. So in a variance, considering the board in 1991 put no restrictions on accessory structures, you're allowed to operate the hotel and everything that comes along with it. Do a lot of land development work at the firm that I work with, and most of the time we come in front of variance recently. You're only allowed to do what you said you were going to do here. You can't do anything else. That restricts it to what it is there. The board's allowed to do that. Most variances, hearings that I go to currently, the boards did that. They didn't do it here. So the variance, the accessory uses, accessory buildings are allowed under Bethlehem zoning ordinance. In the definition section, an accessory use, an accessory building is 13.02.02. It's a subordinate use or building customarily incidental to and located on the same lot occupied by the principal use. Here, no question, the principal use of this particular building is as a historic hotel. That's what it's marketed as. That's what it's here to do. That's what it's for. People to come, stay overnight, nice historic building, bed and breakfast type atmosphere. However, it is classified as a hotel. It's not a bed and breakfast. It has a different definition under Bethlehem zoning ordinance. Now, is this use customarily incidental to its principal use? What the court in cases over and over again has said is you're going to look at, would a reasonable person looking at the building, looking at the use, expect to find that sort of use, that sort of building attached to the principal use? And I think it's unquestionably a reasonable person looking at a historic hotel, or any hotel for that matter, would expect to find an event center. If you just look in the Bethlehem area, we looked at local websites. The Hotel Bethlehem, for example, plays the consummate host for numerous events, meetings, conferences, special events, and groups. Or state-of-the-art facility, excellent location, impeccable surface, expert catering, and conference team are guaranteed for the success of your next meeting event. Similarly, if you look at the Wind Creek Hotel down the street, is suited to cater at the highest levels of corporate and executive talent. Sure Stay Collection by Best Western, which is located off of 512, boasts that it is one of the premier conference centers venues in the Bethlehem and Allentown area for over 50 years. You heard testimony today from both Grant and Justin that they own other properties. Every single one of those historic hotel properties has a restaurant or event center with it. That, by definition, is customarily incidental. A reasonable person looking at the Sayre Mansion would expect to see an event center. You expect a building like that to host corporate events. You expect a building like that to host weddings. That's what you go for. In fact, the Sayre Mansion promotes on its website with 2 acres of picturesque grounds adorned with century-old trees, a dedicated staff willing to help you create the wedding of your dreams. Any wonder that Sayre Mansion has been the venue for so many happy couples. Your wedding day is a day you remember for all your life. With Sayre Mansion, you can feel confident that every moment from the ceremony to the reception will go smoothly and seamlessly. It not only markets itself as a hotel, but a hotel, it's an event space, place you can have the most special events in your life. The Hotel Bethlehem does the same thing. The Wind Creek Event Center does the same thing. The Best Western on 512. And I'm sure a quick search of Bethlehem hotels, you'd find, I would argue, every modest hotel on up has a similar event space. It is customarily incidental to today's hotels. Being customarily and incidental, it's permitted by right under the Bethlehem zoning ordinance, the building and the use. Now, while the use being ongoing for close to 30 years now, or at least since 1997, doesn't guarantee the decision should be in my favor, but obviously the use is customarily and incidental, evidenced by the city's approval year after year after year of the tent space for these events. Has to be approved by the zoning officer, has to be approved by the building code inspector. They know what's going on there. It's part of the application. It's an event space. We want to host weddings. We want to have special events here. That's what you're using it for. Not one time in any of those years from at least 1997 to the present day has Bethlehem said, yeah, I don't think this use belongs on your property. It is customary, it is incidental under the law. It's permitted by right under the Bethlehem zoning ordinance. The first avenue of relief provides that it's not really an accessory building because it is attached in 2 spaces. The accessory building definition says if it's attached from a roof, it is part of the principal building, which mandates it's just an addition. Wouldn't need approval specifically for that. We need approval as an accessory use. But either way, it's permitted by right. Now, if the zoning hearing board feels that there is a restriction, there is a discussion in the 1901 decision that no additions were proposed at that particular time. I would argue that that didn't put a restriction on an accessory building. It simply said at that time they weren't proposing it. However, if they believe that's a condition of the variance that no accessory structure shall be built on the property, we do not need to apply for another use variance. What we're going to ask for in that specific circumstances is a change of that condition. And in that law, the applicant has the ability to either apply for a brand new use variance or it can ask for a change of condition. We're not asking for a use variance. We're simply asking the board to look at that condition and find that it's no longer appropriate based on a change of circumstances. The court has said I'm sorry, excuse my language here. The court has said that what the applicant has to demonstrate is that the condition attached to an existing variance may decide whether the change in circumstances So we have to present substantial evidence that a change in circumstances from the time the original condition was imposed to today makes that particular condition inappropriate. You heard testimony from both Grant and Justin that one, this is a historic hotel. It was built in the 1850s. It's expensive to maintain. For the Hotel Bethlehem's a historic hotel, I'm sure it's very expensive to maintain. Operating the hotel in 1992 as simply a hotel with a conference room was appropriate. Generated enough income to keep up with the maintenance and have a successful business. Sure, nobody's in business to lose money. They're here to be a successful company. But their primary goal, their mission as they demonstrate is to preserve these historic buildings. That gets more and more difficult, more and more expensive. They need to diversify streams of income. In 1992, they said, we have a 20-room hotel. We serve a continental breakfast. We have a conference room in the basement. There's been testimony in 1992 that that tent structure was applied for then. Maybe that was a stream. But at that time, that was appropriate to maintain the building. Originally, the building was an apartment complex. If you look at the 1991 decision, the reason the use variance was granted was because the best use of the building was as a hotel. That was the way we could preserve the building. If you look at the decision in 1991, the zoning hearing board reflects that to preserve this historic building, it's on the hill off of 378. It's the entrance to the south side of Bethlehem. It has importance in the city. We want to preserve this building. We need to give this use variance to let it operate as a hotel. If we look at the application from 5 years go by, we're trying to save this building. We need to operate an event space. We're going to apply for a tent. This is what we're going to do in it. Zoning officer okays it. Building code comes out, says the tent's fine. We're good to go. operates from 1997 on a yearly basis to 2019. In 2019, they come and go, listen, we need to do something different. The needs of our clients are changing. The weddings used to be in June and July. Now they're going to the colder months, late September, early October, March, April. It's not appropriate in a tent. Our guests expect to do events outside of this area. Wasn't so common before. It's becoming more and more common now. We have to turn away people who would like to have their events here. That's a change in circumstances. Mr. Grant, I'm sorry, I'm going to use Grant because they're both Mr. Genslinger. Grant testified that the noise has increased on 378. Now, Mr. Haynes talked about how do you know what kind of graphics. There's no need in any of the case law that we need to demonstrate expert testimony in the increase in decibel level from 1991 to 2019. I think a reasonable person standing on the lawn of Sayre Mansion can obviously understand that traffic has increased. In fact, I first started driving around in 2000, and the wait times at those lights are far longer than they were before. There's obviously an increase in traffic. I think it's pretty common knowledge that in the state of Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley is the fastest growing area in the state. There's businesses come here, people come to live here. It's got a good cost of living. It's a good place to go. That increase in traffic is noisy. Cars are quieter. Sure, the truck I have now is far quieter than the Honda Civic I drove around when I was in law school, far quieter, right? Even though it's a bigger engine, but it's far quieter. But there's still more noise. There's more traffic. There's more people. That's a change in circumstance. Individuals in that trunk structure want to have an event. They want to be able to enjoy themselves. They want to be able to hear each other talk and not have to deal with the excess noise from cars. Beyond the excess noise from the cars itself, I think it shows an improvement to the neighborhood as the noise is not so easily contained in a tent structure. I think it'll improve the noise overall throughout the neighborhood. That's a change in circumstances. The upkeep in the building requires more money. The change in circumstances between what clients are looking for in these particular buildings demand that a seasonal tent structure that's open from March till the beginning of September, from the thaw to the first real frosty day in September, is no longer appropriate. And if this board feels that the 1991 decision mandates or imposes a condition on the mansion that there can be no accessory structures other than the principal mansion, I believe that that condition is no longer appropriate. In that state, we have demonstrated on the record tonight substantial evidence of a change in circumstances, a change in conditions that make that condition no longer appropriate. It is inappropriate to mandate that this hotel operate with solely a seasonal tent structure based on the increase in traffic, the expectation of clients, and the ability to generate additional sources of income to maintain that historic structure. The other option that the court has to justify is the absence of injury to the public interest. Now, there is some injury to the public interest when it comes to, you talked about another hardship, more variances, change in variances. Again, I would ask this board that we are not asking for variance. We are either asking for the approval that this is an accessory building or an accessory use permitted by right, or a changing condition from an original variance that was granted in 1991. It's not a brand new variance. We're not asking for a use variance. It's a hotel. It's been a hotel. It's continued to be a hotel. And in fact, the use, the way you can look at it, is not going to change. What goes on at the Sayre Mansion in that almost exactly the same space is what's been going on since at least 1997. The difference is going to be is that when individuals drive down 378, they're going to see that rendering as opposed to that white tent as exhibited in A8. And beyond being an absence of injury to the public interest, I think that benefits the public interest. I grew up in the Lehigh Valley. I came back here after law school. I came back here after college, got a family now. That's what you expect to see. It's a growing area. The clients not only expect an indoor facility, when you drive up, that's what you see entering the South Side. Get over that bridge, that's what you see. I would argue when it comes to the public interest, it's more beneficial to see that conservatory in the rendering that will be up either the end of this year, maybe next year, depending on how this approval goes, if you give us the approval rather than that white tent. I give an anecdotal story. My boss gives me the sheet. Grant calls into our office, said that he's looking to go for some things in front of the zoning hearing board in Bethlehem for the Sayre Mansion. And I wasn't exactly sure where it was. And I remember asking my boss, is that the one where it has the ugly white tent outside? That's what this is. They're trying to improve the neighborhood. He said, yeah, that's the one. I don't think they want to do that anymore. You should call. What I'll say is we've demonstrated under that there's been a change in conditions or a change in circumstances, presented substantial evidence that that particular condition is no longer appropriate. or it's an accessory building. Either one of those three avenues I indicated on my legal memorandum, that's Exhibit A1, that I believe the zoning officer handed out to you before. Either way gets us to where we want. We don't need all three. We just need one. What we'd ask for is that you approve this through either one of those three and allow the Sayer Mansion to build this conservatory, improve the neighborhood, and allow them to host events as people want them today. Thank you.
For the admission of. You did. All right, Gene, we're going to go off the record and move outside to discuss the case.
The morning call?
Sure.
You're
spelling it same as Grant?
Yeah,
That's your
father and
father?
son. Yep.
760 square foot addition, that is being attached to the mansion, right?
Yes, it is.
What's going to go on in there?
Oh, that's mostly service area to get from the mansion. It's hallway, bathroom, nothing,
Okay.
nothing substantial. The conservatory is the ballroom, what you would see from the customer facing area, and the addition from the conservatory connecting the mansion. Yeah, in the center of it, you'll see there's one little breezeway that connects it for guest traffic, and then back of it, there's a hallway that connects to it to access the kitchen. So coat room spelled out on there if you look at it. Yes, there is. The bathrooms required are sufficient. Practically speaking, nice to have.
It's closer to the.
Yeah, just it's a more of a guest. I guess it's more of a convenience than a requirement, but nice to have them.
Is there a name for your company?
Yes, Settlers Hospitality Group LLC.
Say it again.
Settlers, SETTLERS, Hospitality Group LLC, and we operate as just Settlers Hospitality, and that is also our website, settlershospitality.com. And so you can see our other hotels.
I was going to ask you, like, what other hotels?
Are you familiar with Lake Wallen Park at all?
Yeah, yeah.
So the Settlers Inn, which is our namesake and my parents' original property, also a historic hotel of America.
Settlers Inn.
In Hawley, HAWLEY. Ledges Hotel.
Ledges,
Yeah, that's ours.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah. And also, that building is 1890. Ledges. Settlers is 1927. And Ledges Hotel.
I mean, was that
1890.
18. So
It was a glass factory. Yep. And the adjoining stone building next to it, if you've been there's a big stone building you drive past. It's called the Hawley Silk Mill, and that was a silk factory. So two factories next to each other, and that is also our building. And so we operate a bakery, coffee shop, fitness center, and retail stores in there. And that's also part of Settlers Hospitality. And then we also have Silver Birches Resort. Silver Birches, like the tree. Resort. And that's on Lake Wallen Pawpaw. And that's 1929. Hello.
I'm all right.
And yes, and they're all listed on those websites. So Settlers Inn is Settlers Inn.
I just wanted to get rid of the name. I didn't realize you had
Yeah,
other places.
yeah, we operate 5 restaurants. We operate five hotels. We have probably, depending how you classify it, 7 or 8 catering venues. Most are attached to the hotels. Sayer Mansion is by far our smallest property, and for now
Certainly it is.
is the smallest. Yep, and is also the oldest. Is also the oldest, smallest but oldest. And
These two
it will be a combination of glass, it'll be largely glass, because everywhere you see glass on the outside is glass on the inside. It'll be a combination of masonry with a little bit of stucco in between the glass, and most likely a polished concrete floor with exposed steel structure. So the inside would emulate the industrial style of the south side. The structure, the roof structure that would have the glass, yeah, would be exposed. And so the inside would emulate an industrial but elegant ballroom. Some people refer that as industrial contemporary as the style. And the outside mimics the American Gothic architecture of the Sayre. You see those like pointed windows and the
It was here when you first came to
yeah.
interviewing someone.
Creative Conservatories did the design work, but I would be lying if we've not made any commitments on who would do the construction. So, but
Well, we're hopeful.
You know, you would have it.
I think it's I think the most optimistic would be 9 to 12 months, and the
9 to 12 months.
would be the most optimistic, and the more conservative outlook would be 12 to 18 months. We're hoping the latest it would go into service for the public would be in August of 2021, like the return of the Lehigh school year, and also Music Fest. However, and the most optimistic would be for this year's holiday season. That would be the most optimistic. Yeah.
Unless.
Yeah.
No.
Barring more, I mean, this is not our first bite at the podium here.
Good shape.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah. You want to take, I can give you my phone number as well. If you, because I'll take, if you have any like press inquiry, you can direct it to me. And that's 571 area code 749 8118. And that's my cell phone. So that'll just cut right to the chase. That's cool.
We'll see what happens.
I mean, I don't. There's really nothing changing here except for the building. Still doing the same thing.
It's really the same
I've been
business.
to events in that
I think I tried to impress upon that what's going on.
I would just say it's
Actually, like, what's-
Well,
How
my
about this? The
vote
same
is
but nicer
technically
and year
Right.
when they came into
I
me.
think I missed that.
And I
I missed that
denied
in
that
closing. I said the only thing
permit
that's
based
different is the
on
roof over
my
here.
findings.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's
Right.
been there.
Yeah.
They change
Yeah.
a permanent structure more than a
Yeah.
canvas swap.
Right.
And they,
Right.
it
Looks nicer. I think as they both testified to that, it looks beautifies the neighborhood.
if you do look on our website, you'll see our values around sustainability and preservation is at the core of almost everything we do. So you can lift anything off that website. You're welcome.
Everything's good on it.
Yeah.
It was interesting what we did with the ledges. I expected an end.
He has been at Ledges before.
I stayed there with my wife. Place it was interesting. The outside had this old feel. I went in there. It was like this super contemporary room, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I live in a house from 1852. Everything is
Oh man.
it's Victorian. I mean, we like it, but then all of a sudden you go slick. It's like it's good to change.
When with the Sayre, it was originally had bedrooms, whereas at Ledges it was a factory, so there was no footprint to renovate. It was just a big empty space.
You can
So
do whatever you want.
you can do whatever you want. So we looked at, I mean, that was really an industrial building as much as the blue stone and the masonry is elegant in its own way. But at the time, that was just how they built the factory. And so you would never be able to afford it today. And the only reason it's waterfront with the waterfalls running into it is because they needed it for hydroelectric power. And so what is today's waterfall view and stone masonry building, which is great for hotel and restaurant, was yesterday's factory and energy.
But it works better as an adaptive reuse than it did.
Having the bar near the water.
Yeah.
We had fun with that.
Yeah, we wouldn't object if you mentioned the Pocono properties in your article.
Look at that much space.
Look at you. I love the marketing thing right there. Great. That was right down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Like you got this down, don't you? You've been doing this for a little while. Just when you were talking, I was like, I know that. Okay. He's been doing this a while.
I definitely don't do the engineering.
You gotta know what you're doing now, right?
You did good.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, you know.
It was better, I think.
Yes, I did. Exactly.
Did you get through?
Yep, I got it.
Dean, I'd like to go back on the record.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to grant the relief subject to the following conditions. Number one, maximum of 150 individuals at the events. 2, stormwater approval with the neighbors at Wilbur Mansion, approved by the city, reviewed and approved by the city. And 3, to provide a copy of the ongoing contract with the valet parkers that obligates the valet company to show where they have contracted space to meet the increased needs for parking at the events that you're hosting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Before you vote on that, sorry, can I? Just tell them about the contract condition. We're not objecting to the condition, please.
Yeah. I just want to make one comment, make sure we're speaking the same language, so to speak.
Sure.
So often these are per diem, happy to file them in advance as they occur. Sometimes we use different valet companies. It's not one ongoing contract. I just
Understand.
picked up on your language there.
If you wanted a contract like next week.
No. Just as to meet the needs and to
There
provide
needs to
proof.
be a contract in place before each event. If
Okay,
that's
no,
3
that's-
different vendors,
Sorry.
or if it's one for the whole year, I don't think the board cares.
No, we don't.
The other comment I had on that, again, just to make sure we're in lockstep, is for smaller events. So say we have a 60-person wedding, which is actually not unusual. We don't need a valet. But if we have a 150-person event, we absolutely do. And so, in practical terms, we don't have a valet at every single event because for smaller events, it would just add an expense that the people don't need.
Mr. Chairman, can I then modify that third condition to be for events that require valet parking, that a contract with the valet company be provided to the city of Bethlehem
And I'll
to
second that.
provide proof of where they're parking the vehicles?
No problem. That sounds good.
I'll second that.
Okay, then we do have a motion and a second with conditions on the floor. Do you call?
Ms.
the roll,
Stone? Mr. Schneck?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Shantz?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
please? Yes. Your appeal's been granted with the conditions, so good luck with the project. 2020, 2021, not quite sure.
Sooner would be better.
Good luck.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is all.